of the magnet fluid into inanimate objects by touching them. Like he became a conduit for the magnets, and he would magnetize their beds so that when they left there, when they went home, they would have the after effect of the magnets when they were at home. Yeah, it's really interesting. And so they could have it every hour of the day, he said. Okay, so he even magnetized the trees in his garden and chairs and practice rooms to benefit the patients. So in the meantime, though, these guys, the Royal Society of Medicine, I know, they just wouldn't give him a chance. They would not give him a chance. He tried. They wanted, they wanted to give him cases to work on and so that they could prove it or something. But he said, you're not going to give me cases where people are opposed to me, because I know, power of suggestion, if they're opposed for me, they won't be healed. So he turned them down in that case because he knew they were trying to trick him. And then he said, well, why don't I choose 20 patients, half to be treated by the medical faculty and half by myself, and a decision to be made by lot, and then see what happens, which ones get cured, and they wouldn't do it. And then, they wouldn't do it. And then he tried again by taking several bad cases. What?
This sounds like a first blind study, and they...
Yeah, exactly.
Bill goes for that now.
I know, right? He was a smart guy. He tried again by taking several bad cases and applying to the Royal Society of Medicine to examine and certify them. They refused. They did not trust their diagnosis of epilepsy, paralysis, blindness, death, and says it might be feigned. So in other words, they wouldn't inspect the patients before, but then they wouldn't also take his inspection of them before. They were just not wanting to do it. And although he did everything he could to ascertain the genuineness of the diseases, he was always refused. And his stuff came back to him unopened. I mean, it must have been pretty frustrating. I mean, like anybody, that's trying to do something new, and then people are just like, no, this is not possible. So he started to publish his own statements in the newspaper and stuff. I tailored this down. It was really a lot longer, but this was a guy that said, when I arrived at Dr. Mesmer's establishment, my head was constantly shaking. My neck was bent forward. My eyes were protruding from their sockets and greatly inflamed. My tongue paralyzed. I could not speak without difficulty. And I had an involuntary laugh and more pain between the shoulders, staggering when walking. Animal magnetism made me feel the most extraordinary sensations from head to foot. I am now free of all infirmities. Yeah. It sounds like he might have had Tourette's. I don't know. So, other things they said that, sometimes, he would get a cure. There was a guy, Dr. Deslin, who was kind of on his side, and they chose some cases, and they brought him to the Royal Society to examine them, and because this Dr. Deslin, they supported him for some reason, because he had credibility. And then they would just say things like, well, nature often cures without the help of man. So there's another reason why not to believe that he could have been helping them. And then I guess they brought the 27 propositions to the medical profession, and no, that didn't work either. They just wouldn't give up. They sent him a fake patient. This was interesting, that feigned illness, then said he was cured. And then they used this as proof that that his techniques were a hoax. So sad. He must have been very frustrating for him. So he did have an ally, this guy here, Louis XVI, and his daughter, Marie Antoinette, or his wife, Marie Antoinette. They liked him. And they actually gave him some money to continue his work. And they set him up in the palace, or they gave him a place, and they called it pseudoscience, though. That's interesting. And they gave him money, like I said, and he wasn't allowed to leave France until he could establish his system. But the medical profession came in again and, kind of turned the emperor against him, too. Not in a bad way, but just in that, they just didn't believe him. They just didn't want to believe him. And in fact, they set up a commission of two of the most eminent scientists of the times were among them. And we'll recognize one of the names, Benjamin Franklin. was on the commission to prove that, basically he was guilty before he was proven innocent. After studying the evidence, the commission said there was no evidence to support Mesmer's claim to have discovered a new magnet fluid. Any benefits to patients from his treatments were simply imagination. Yeah, that's what they said. And so they said that which we have learned, or at least that which has been proven. Did I write this one down? I did. That which we have learned, this is part of the commission's, that which we have learned, or at least that we have proved to us in a clear and dissatisfactory manner by the examination of the process of magnetism, is that man can act upon man at any time and almost at will by striking his imagination, that the simplest gestures and signs can have the most powerful effect, and that the action of man upon the imagination may be reduced to an art and conducted with method upon subject who have faith. What?
You believe.
Yeah.
Placebo.
Yeah, placebo is done until you
Placebo.
believe. Yeah, one of the things they said was, well, I'll get to it later about him. If he had even, sometimes when we're really tunnel vision about something, we're not willing to look. We have to be careful of that in this philosophy. We're not willing to look at other ideas that could be bringing us more information about what we had discovered. And that might have been what happened to Anton Mesmer. He might have been so fixated on the magnets and the fluids and all of that he wasn't even able to entertain the idea that some of it could have been the power of suggestion. I don't know. But at this point, after this report came out, it didn't matter because there were he had trained hundreds of doctors to practice magnetism. The medical society, they didn't even care. They gave up their licenses to do this. So and other things he did, he established a free clinic and helped people that were impoverished. So they said he had a very good heart and just kindness and a good heart. And obviously if he was doing it for people that were impoverished, he obviously did. And always giving care to the poor. And they said he was a person of great service. And his friend was this guy, what's his name? He was an attorney. And he said, in order to protect he protected a shamefully persecuted man from the fate prepared to him for him by the blind hatred of his enemies. So I guess he was really hated by the medical profession to the point, it must have been awful. I don't think he was tarred and feathered. I didn't hear that, but he was made into being a very educated man. Obviously, we saw the education he had, made to be someone that, was just like a wizard or not that there's anything wrong with wizards. I like them. But, a charlatan, I think is a better word because of fake. Yes.
So the two questions I have, since this is all new to me, since I actually studied it, and now it's like a new man. The two things is, one is that supposedly in conclusion, is that something that's bad?
No, but it's bad to Mesmer.
Because to me,
Mesmer
I'm looking
doesn't-
at that as kind of our philosophy, for one, because we do have a method that is subject to faith, and it is of stirring an imagination that creates health and wellness.
That's the whole point.
And then okay.
Yeah, no, that's the whole point. What I said, if he would have been entertained this idea, he might have been able to take his profession, his talents in a different direction, and actually, instead of just sticking to the animal fluids, do you know what I mean? But he wouldn't even entertain the idea that it was a suggestion.
And the second question is, did he have, when you came to him, did you pay him and have a fee for your services?
Yes,
Yeah.
except for the impoverished people. Yes,
Okay.
definitely. Any other questions right now? So anyway, he went into retirement eventually. He went back to his farmhouse in Reidelsville. I can't pronounce these Germans' names. Reidelsville. Apparently the King of Prussia wanted him to come and work there, but he wouldn't go because he was getting older at this point. But the King of Prussia sent his head physician to him to study, and then they created a 300-bed hospital where they only used magnetism and what they called mesmerism now. They say his last years were happy. He lived to be 81. That's pretty good back in those days, right? And he was seen on horseback. He loved animals, and I love this story. He had a pet canary. So sweet, that he left open in his room. The cage was always open, and every morning the bird would fly out and perch on Mesmer's head while he slept and wake him with a song, nor would the concert end until Mesmer arose, sounds like our cat, and dressed himself. He could put the canary to sleep with a light stroke of his hand and wake him by stroking his feathers in the reverse direction. So this canary was his pet. And Mesmer loved music, like I said before, and they said he could sing, he liked to draw, and he also still found time in his neighborhood to help people if they were sick. And so on February 20th in 1815, he didn't feel so well, and he called the priest to come, but before the priest got there, he had already passed. And they say they left his body there untouched. I don't know whether this is legend or true, but the canary did not, as usual, fly out of his cage to perch upon his head. The bird neither sang nor did he eat anymore. The canary died shortly afterward. I believe it. I want to believe it because I know how special animals are. And apparently Mesmer asked for a very, humble interment, but they disregarded his wishes, and he had a really huge funeral. He was very well loved, and they said there were many that were indebted to him for his health and his life. And so, his mortal remains, if you want to see them, are in a churchyard in Meersburg, and there's a monument for him in Berlin, that was put up by his what?
Sacred Journey.
Yeah, we'll go pilgrimage to see Anton Mesmer's. And there's also a monument erected in Berlin for him by his admirers and disciples. So even though the medical profession didn't like him, there were people that loved him. And it says, throughout his life, Mesmer had one single aim: to demonstrate the natural force that he had discovered and to use it for the benefit of humanity. His reward was mainly plentiful harvest of anger, hatred, malice, and uncharitableness, and the intrinsic greatness of his character is vindicated chiefly in this, that he never allowed himself to become embittered by the treatment he received. His nature was sweet and amiable to the end. That's what they said about him, and that's what I want to believe about him. So, What else do I have? This is just a little synopsis of his life. German physician with an interest in astronomy who theorized that there was a natural energetic transference that occurred between all animated and inanimated objects that he called animal magnetism, and other spiritual forces often grouped together as mesmerisms. Mesmerism is considered to be a form of vitalism and share features with other vitalist theories that also emphasize the movement of life energy through distinct channels in the body. Well, I mean, I think this is like modern quantum physics now, for sure, right? So, what?
The Chinese.
Yeah, acupuncture, all of it, right? Except for Patrick was telling me today, what did you say about acupuncture?
Oh, I was saying that I heard on NPR this whole thing of acupuncture, and the vets are starting to use it a lot to get off the opiums or what is that? And except it still is not proven. They still are calling it, even though they're approving it in different areas, they're still calling it placebo, and that there is no possible way for anyone to prove how it really works. And I've heard that for a long time, but they're starting to incorporate it now so the vets can actually have it because they're so strung out right now, and the death toll is very, very high in the overdosing on this stuff. So people are getting great results from the acupuncture versus the actual pain pills, but they can't get it anymore because they cannot prove it.
Really,
And
that's interesting.
they cannot prove
Who's
what
had
it actually does.
acupuncture?
Oh, yeah.
And who's had benefits from it? But I don't know what proving it would look like.
Well,
I guess
because-
they'd have to look.
AMA again.
Yeah, I think it is too, because with Bruce Lipton's in these not Bruce Lipton, but Joe Dispenza's in these laboratories doing all these tests and looking at things under microscopes, and they are proving it. So I can't imagine they couldn't prove
Just-
that they could look at somebody that had acupuncture and
I'll
watch
give
their
this
energy
to
field.
Ruth
Yes.
after.
Acupuncture is so old. It's been in China, and they have been using it for miracles. Besides, I know a lot about acupuncture. My son is one.
Just
Your
on,
son.
yeah, but
Yeah.
just on that note, it's not that they can't prove that it's doing good, that it's actually, or they wouldn't be put in the Veterans Hospital. What they can't prove, and this is my friend who's an acupuncturist, they can't really tell you exactly how the energy, we know it's moving, but they can't record it and document it and do all that stuff that they want to do in order to make it.
Right. Maybe they don't care.
Subtle energy, but with
Right.
physics, they'll be able
Yeah, they will.
Absolutely.
to. They don't like it.
So beyond Mesmer was this guy. It became known as, he's considered really the father of hypnosis. I think James Braid, who was the first person, I'm not going to go into James Braid that much. You can read this little thing here, that he's a major figure in the history of hypnosis, so much so that he often regarded as the father of hypnosis. Indeed, it could be argued that hypnosis as we know it today didn't exist before Braid. He removed hypnosis from the occult shadows of mesmerism through his insights into the nature of trance and by coining the word hypnosis itself. So, see, they called it the occult shadows of mesmerism. Yeah. It's interesting, right? So what does this all have to do with us today? That's what I want. What did it have to do with science of mind? So, dear Ernest, practically the whole race, human race, is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told it to think. Practically the whole human race is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told it to think. So if we want to just go back to the idea, forget about the magnets and all of that, but the idea of what came out of this, which is the power of suggestion, and we come to our religious science and how Ernest felt about all that. I did in my little book, I know he must have studied all of this, and he studied all the great, psychologists and people that were studying Jung and all these people that are studying the power of the mind and all of that. So Ernest Holmes' whole thing was, he knew the subconscious mind could be suggested to, but what he wanted for us was to consciously program ourselves from our conscious mind, and to not. He was against hypnotism to the point that he said, you need to be, it's you need to be consciously doing it. You don't need somebody else doing it because it all comes back to you. So, I picked up some terms from the Science of Mind textbook that we use in the Science of Mind. Suggestion, receiving the thoughts of another, which is that they were accusing basically Mesmer. Suggestion, accept the ideas of others and believes in them. It may be conscious or unconscious. So Ernest believed that the power of suggestion was really powerful. I mean, that's why it was so important also not to say things to people that were detrimental or, that would influence them, because we pick those things up. Especially before the age of 6, we picked up everything that our parents, that's why I believe, and I'm sure we all believe, and as we study this, that why we have such a hard time getting over some things in our life is because we were programmed when everything we learned before we were 6 is still in there. And we're working on overcoming it. So, yeah, we can be suggested to, for sure. We call the subjective, beneath the threshold of consciousness, the law of our life. So our subjective is the same word that Ernest would use for subconscious, is the subjective field, which is subject, obviously, to our conscious mind. And that's the servant of the spirit through the ages. The universal soul, we also call it the law of being, the creative principle of nature, and the law of the spirit. So that subconscious is creating everything in our lives, and it can be suggested to, and that's the whole point, right? That we can do it consciously, and we can overcome these patterns that we might have. Telepathy is another word he uses. So see, he studied all this stuff. Thought transference. Atmosphere is the mental atmosphere that surrounds a person, place, and it can be felt. Have you ever walked into a room And you know, we're all in the one mind, and we can feel when the energy in that room is like in a certain way, and it could be coming from one person sometimes, right? But we're subject to all that if we allow ourselves to be. And then auto-suggestion. These are all just words that Ernest has in the textbook. Make suggestions to oneself, and it comes from our belief. Those are things that are just automatic, things that we really don't want to. Sometimes we want to overcome our auto-suggestions because they come from our beliefs, and they might not always be to our betterment. And then race consciousness that we're all submerged in, which we're born into race consciousness, which is the consciousness of the place that we grow up, the consciousness of the world that we live in. We're in a definite race consciousness right now with our political world. I mean, we're in the middle of, and we get the opportunity to buy into all that, or we get the opportunity to rise above it. And that's always what Ernest wanted for us. So he uses the word objective as the part of us that has the will and consciousness and choice, and the subjective, which is the subconscious that we were just talking about, is totally reactive and doesn't discriminate. So, and then here's the ether, a universal medium. Did I change words, pages? Oh, sorry. The ether, a universal medium, which is supposed to be the last known analysis of matter, intersphering all things in space, which is what we were calling the fluid, right? And the formless substance, the ultimate stuff from which all forms are created, universally present in an unformed state and acted upon by conscious and subconscious intelligence. So there's all this energy. This is what we believe, and this is what they're talking about in quantum physics now, that there's this unformed energy that is receiving the impress of our thoughts at all times and creating our experience. And basically it's within us, it's surrounding us, and all of that, yeah. And I was going to read healing on page 597, but I don't know why, and I didn't bring my book. I guess it was the definition of healing, yes. So, yes.
I think that when Ernest Holmes, in the 50s, about when the 30s and 50s, when he did this, when he mentioned hypnotism and his idea.
20s too, yeah.
In the 20s, that was a time when the mental control of another, that's what they thought. That's how the mentalists would go in and do things, okay? But that has been proven completely different today.
Right. This is the past.
Yeah, this is
I mean,
the
I don't
past.
know. I haven't been hypnotized lately or gone to a mentalist or whatever they call themselves.
Well, even
But-
today, even if you go to a mental suggestion online and just download something that you want to make your life feel better or something, it's still you doing the work where you're just sitting there
Right.
and relaxing.
You're talking about somebody coming in and going, and now Stephanie, putting you in a trance and then telling you to do things or whatever. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
That
well,
was
I
what it
think
was more
that
like
that's-
back then?
Yeah, I mean, I see the mass consciousness thing that he was also talking about, but the mental control of another, I don't know.
I don't know. The times I've been hypnotized, the person has been was mentally controlling me. But I never felt out of control. I don't know why. I never really studied it that deeply. I wasn't that interested in it at the time. I mean, I was a little bit, but I didn't go into like the scientific. I'm not. You probably would know more about it because you were a therapist.
I work with self-hypnosis, and that was actually taking somebody to a place inside of them, their own consciousness, their own experience. And the purpose of it, if somebody had had a traumatic experience, it was to try to help them to heal it.
So what Stephanie's saying is true then, that back in those days it was a different thing. Go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I was just saying that the mental control of another is like the 3 times that I went to have for the smoking. It must have been it's been 25 years since I quit, but went to the hypnosis and I'd sit in the chair and then they would put me under and then can tell me that I never wanted to smoke again, until I walked out and lit up. But that's when I knew Science of Mind actually is right on, because I knew it wasn't until I decided that I would actually quit.
Right.
But other people did. But I'm saying that was trying to control what I was thinking so that I would think something new. At least, yes, Malia.
I think back in Ernest's time, back then, hypnotist, it was like a theater. It was like a theatrical thing
Right,
where
and it
people
still
get on
is
the
in some
stage and
places.
cluck like a chicken. But I gave and received hypnotherapy many times, and I never felt like I was out of control or someone controlled me. It would be like a spiritual mind treatment. I would tell them what I wanted, and then they would help me to visualize it and to incorporate that into my life.
Yeah, I guess there's probably people that are misusing things all over the place, right? Yeah.
Wasn't that what Darren Brown was doing?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, he was, right.
Shoot glass.
Right, he was.
Been hypnotized.
Yeah, did you ever see that film? What was it called? Everybody needs to
A
watch that
Miracle,
film.
Miracle.
Yeah, it's a 45-minute thing. It's worth watching. Did you want to say something?
No, I had hypnosis and I was fine with the process. And then because I meditated a lot, and he said, "Wow, you really go under deep and fast." And I went, yeah. And he said, "We have a group, and I think you should join us." And then I got scared, and I said, "No."
What was your intuition? Yeah, I used to get hypnotized all the time. My friend was doing past life therapy, and I was his first guinea pig. And I was really good at it, too, because I could go under really, really quick. But he didn't ask me to join a group. Yeah, there's probably people taking advantage of people in all things, right? And, yeah. So I wanted to touch on this because people are always asking me about insanity and where it comes from and what we think about it in science of mind. And it's a temporary or permanent control of the conscious mind by the subconscious mind. I thought that was really an interesting definition. So in the conscious mind has been basically submerged in the subconscious and has no control. And when we treat somebody that has some sort of problem like that, we treat that there's only one mind, and that mind is perfect, and that person's mind is really that mind. We don't deny that that person is having issues and doesn't need medication and all that. Of course they do. But when we treat as practitioners, we know that there is only one mind, and that mind is perfect, and it's God's mind. And that person, man, woman, whoever, has that same mind that we all have. But I thought that was an interesting definition, that it was a permanent control of the conscious mind by the subconscious mind, which makes total sense to me. Yeah, so.
I mean, Rita, on that note, my father was a paranoid schizophrenic, and it was so clear when the subconscious became that he had no consciousness left to be able to do that when other people were talking, and he would become other people and things of that nature. So you could tell that was it. But if you really, now knowing what we know in religious science, is that we can't for a moment take our sight away that there's only one mind. And if that one mind, as you were saying, knows nothing opposite of itself. So we may experience different things, but no, it's not. So I've actually witnessed it, and it's a fascinating thing to watch the subconscious rule the consciousness of an individual. Yeah. It's frightening, actually, but besides that, if you really look at it from not a frightening point of view, and you look at it from the one mind, there's kind of a relaxation that I could see. He would go into a peace when he would regain his consciousness of that he was back into control of the voices and the stuff. Yeah.
And to go back to like medication, it's necessary for these people. People say, "Oh, we don't believe in medication." No, it's definitely necessary. But I also would believe that it would be necessary for these people to be in some sort of therapy that would help them to regain their conscious mind, the control of their, the conscious mind controlling their subconscious mind instead of opposite. Sometimes I think, and from people I know, and even in my own family, is they're being medicated and everything, but they're not getting the other help. And that's the part that makes me sad, because they're never going to get better if that. There's nothing wrong with medication. But let's let them know who they truly are at the same time, right? Yeah.
And just one other thing, just think of when we go unconscious or into our subconscious when we're
Right.
in reactive mode.
Right.
We're actually losing that, and that's the whole point of science of mind and spirit, is that we're continually trying to get back to consciousness and not just reacting by, oh my God, I don't know, you did that, and all of a sudden you're reacting in a whole way till you gain consciousness again. And we go through traumas, and we go
Right.
through all those things, yeah.
That's why this thing is so great, because it's helping me realize how that reaction can come. Like, I didn't even realize it, that I would react like that it was so unconscious, so subconscious. And now I'm able to be aware of it and stop myself and go, woo! I don't want to do that anymore. So I really like this. That's what
Yeah, it's a fun household we're living in, just to let you know.
Yeah, but so anyway, I wanted to bring this up because people ask about practitioners, because we're not hypnotizing people and we're not in their minds. This is why a practitioner, we are taught that a practitioner treats his own mind about the patient. So this is why it works. Because when we treat, meaning spiritual mind treatment, we know about you whatever it is you can't know about yourself right then, because your belief is down, or you're just in the middle of the muck and mire and you can't see it. But we know it. But we know it about you. We don't know it for you. We don't know it to you, and we're not taking control of your mind. We know it about you, and we're speaking into the one mind that we all occupy. There's one mind, and we're all in it. And so when we speak into that mind about you, the truth about you, that mind is activated for you. It has to be, because we're speaking into law. And then the only thing the person, and Ernest Holmes says this somewhere too, doesn't even have to believe it. The person only has to be receptive. That's all it's asked for, is receptivity. And not receptivity to the practitioner, but receptivity to the idea that they are whole and complete. And because there's a place that's never been touched by anything that is the truth of who you are, and that's what the practitioner is speaking about. But it's very important to know that we treat our own mind, and we reiterate that over and over to our students. You're not going into somebody else's mind. That's why we don't use you in spiritual mind treatment, although we fight it sometimes. I don't know why. We want to say you, but if you think about it, we're not speaking to the person. That brings us down to the field of speaking to the person and directing them, whereas we're speaking into the one mind and activating it, or directing it, not activating it. It's already activated. Does that make sense? So we have a couple more minutes. If anybody has questions about Anton or anything about religious science, or I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I just love to say that, would like to say that this has been, you have put an incredible amount of research and time into this. I've never heard, 99% of this I've never heard. Or
too,
seen
Nancy.
any of these
Amazing.
pictures, the 27 proposition whatevers, and on all of this. I just want to thank you for your dedication and your willingness to give so much of yourself to the elevation of consciousness here on Kauai. You bet.
Nancy was my mentor when I was getting ordained. Yeah, she was. I
There you
love
go.
her.
Do you want this,
Thank you.
Tony?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I always think about the You Can Hear Your Life book by Louise Hay, and all the different diseases that she lists. And
Yeah.
most of it is fear, guilt, resentment, and criticism that she says. So a lot of that is real negativity that goes into our subconscious. Did they use, I had a question, did they use like stones or,
I don't know that Anton Mesmer used stones. I think he was totally into magnets. But it's possible that he did, but I don't know. I know that back in the old days, in ancient times, they used stones, and they still do now, as a form of moving energy, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
Phil Donahue.
So when I read the Edinburgh papers,
Lectures, yes.
and Trower talked about Mesmer, right?
Probably.
How did that?
Phineas Quimby was a
And
mesmerist.
Phineas Quimby too. So just give us a couple of sentences
I
about
don't know.
how they if
Well,
you know.
Yeah, I know Phineas Quimby used mesmerism before he found his own method, and he used basically a clairvoyant, Bookmar, whatever his name was, Bookmar, I think, and he would put him into a trance, and Bookmar would diagnose the diseases, and he would put him into a trance, and then he would diagnose the diseases in the person's body, and then he would subscribe cures for it. And I believe that was the form of mesmerism that he used, because he actually became educated in mesmerism, Phineas Quimby, and then he dropped it and came up with his own method, which was direct connect to the patient. But he was still reading his field, his energy field, and being able to diagnose what was wrong, but it was a thought. He saw the thought that created the disease, not necessarily the disease.
That even though his life seemed to be wasted,
Well, yeah,
you
no.
know, on one hand,
Oh, yeah.
nothing was ever lost because it was perfectly put in place. So
Right.
all of these line upon line, precept upon precept, we could get to an understanding.
Right. And isn't that the way it is? I mean, we're just constantly evolving, right?
But it's interesting too. I was thinking just one thing about the acupuncturists too that just came through. It's not that they're not believing that it doesn't work. It's also they can't get your medical insurance won't pay for it. That's what they were trying to say, and that's one of the criterias of getting. Because whenever I had my acupuncturist, I always paid out of pocket because my provider wouldn't provide. So, but I think what's interesting to me is that we're still, to this day, when something works, even when it works, like what is it that Anita Majone, I mean, even then the doctors were, yeah, but I'm thinking there couldn't be a yeah, but anywhere near that woman's healing. And so, but we're not that far in our development of people still not wanting to accept that our mind is that powerful. The
So
placebo.
I guess in the end, answer to it all is for us to just do our own thing.
Well, it depends on
And
ourselves.
prove it, right?
Yeah, prove it.
And
for
live our
ourselves.
lives as examples. And I'm really, respecting the work of Joe Dispenza, because I'm seeing the effects in my life right now of using his methods along with my spiritual mind treatment. But it's the same stuff. He's doing the same stuff that Ernest Holmes was teaching. He's just brought it to a way that people can understand it, and actually from out of the theoretical, which is what Ernest Holmes wanted. He wanted us to prove it. He in fact, there was a part in one of the curriculums where he said, please go out and prove that this is true. Go to science and get this proven, because, it's so that it's not all airy-fairy and theoretical, that it actually is. So I'm really grateful that these new scientists are actually proving what we all knew, the mystics knew all along, But we have to work it. If we don't work it, right? Anything else? Yes, you have to live it to work it.
Absolutely.
Work it by
Thank
living
you,
it.
Rita. That
Thank
is
you.
Absolutely.
But I want
wonderful.
to close. Can I ask you to treat us out? Would you? I would just be so special for me to have you do our closing treatment. Thank you.
So let's just all take a deep breath right now. And let it go. Let's do that again. And let it go. And to know that in our time together, in this one mind, this one life, this one consciousness, this one life force that brought us all together this evening, there are no accidents. So everyone who was supposed to be here is here. And what needed to be spoken has been spoken. What's needed to be heard has been heard. And there's been a shift. There has been a change. There has been a shift in consciousness in every individual here, and also in the awareness, in the energy field of all those surrounding us, because something has taken place. When we walk out these doors, we will be changed individuals from the ones who walked in, because something has happened. Everything is energy, and there's been an energy exchange here tonight, and it has been positive and good and expansive and intelligent and practical and usable. And we're all free now to apply it to our lives if we choose. We're also free not to apply it if we do not choose or if we do not believe. It's all our belief. It's all according to our belief and according to our faith. And so I know that everything that has needed to be heard, has needed to be known, has needed to be accepted, has needed to be released, has needed to be allowed, has been allowed in the space of love and light and great blessings. And so I am so deeply grateful for the information, for the shift in consciousness, for the shift in awareness and a willingness in each and every individual to at least entertain a new idea, a new possibility, and to also honor all of those in our path that have brought us to where we are today. I'm grateful for Anton Mesmer, for Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, for Barber, for Ernest Holmes, for all of the great philosophers and thinkers who dared to believe what they believed, even in the face of denial and criticism of every stripe and color. So I know as we go forth today that we have the courage as well to stand in our truth, to speak our truth with compassion and love, and to give everyone the freedom to do the same. And so I am so deeply grateful for this time together, for the energy here, the passion, the love, the willingness. I'm grateful for Reverends Rita and Patrick. I'm grateful for our time together on this magnificent island. And I know that we're surrounded and infused by a love that is greater than anything we can possibly imagine. So we go forth from here renewed, reborn, and ready to take on the world in a brand new way. We have greater courage, greater faith, greater belief. And I'm grateful for all of it. And with great love, I release this word as law into God mind, knowing it is done, that my word accomplishes that for which I send it. I simply let it be, and we cement it by together saying, and so it is. Amen.